I'm 82 years old. If you feel anxiety at 50, watch this before it gets worse. Do you remember what it felt like to be truly at peace? That sensation of your mind being still, your breathing slow and steady, your shoulders relaxed? For many of us in our golden year, that feeling has become nothing but a distant memory. You wake up with your heart already racing, wondering what new worry today will bring. The constant tightness in your chest has become such a familiar companion that you've almost forgotten what it's like to breathe freely. Perhaps you find yourself lying awake at 3 a.m., your mind spinning with thoughts about your health, your finances, your loved ones. Or maybe you've noticed how you've started avoiding social gatherings, because the very thought of making conversation sends waves of panic through your body. You might even have experienced those terrifying moments when your heart pounds so hard you're convinced you're having a heart attack, only to be told it's just anxiety. And the worst part? You've been told that this is simply what getting older looks like. That increased worry and fear are inevitable companions of aging. I know exactly how this feels because I've lived it myself. At 82 years old, I've spent decades battling the growing monster of anxiety that threatened to steal what should have been my most peaceful years. But I have good news for you, news I wish someone had shared with me when I was 50. Anxiety doesn't have to get worse. In fact, with the right approaches, these can be the most serene and content years of your life. In today's video, we're revealing 5 powerful science-backed techniques specifically designed to address the unique anxiety challenges that come with aging. These aren't generic tips you've heard 1,000 times before. These are specialized approaches that acknowledge the physical and emotional changes that occur as we move through our 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And if you watch until the end, I'll share the one practice that completely transformed my relationship with anxiety at age 75. A technique so effective, yet so simple that I only wish I had discovered it 25 years earlier. So please, don't make the same mistake I did, waiting until anxiety has stolen years of joy before taking action. This video could be the turning point in your relationship with anxiety. Before we continue, if you find value in what we're sharing today, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below sharing the one symptom of anxiety that bothers you the most. Your experience might help someone else feel less alone in their struggle. If you resonated with what we've discussed so far and are seeking natural ways to calm your mind and live with greater peace, our channel is a safe space created especially. Each week we share simple and effective techniques that have helped thousands of people reclaim their inner peace. We're together on this journey, and every step you take toward well-being matters. Click the subscription button below and activate notifications to receive our videos as soon as they're published. Remember, you don't need to face anxiety alone, and small changes can make a significant difference in your quality of life. Let's begin with the first technique, one that specifically addresses how our nervous system changes as we age. It's called rhythmic sensory grounding, and it works by retraining your aging nervous system to recognize safety signals in your environment. You see, as we get older, our brain's threat detection system often becomes more sensitive while simultaneously becoming less accurate. This means we're more likely to experience false alarms, those moments when our body goes into fight or flight mode, even though there's no real danger present. Rhythmic sensory grounding counters this by deliberately engaging your senses in a rhythmic, predictable pattern that signals safety to your brain. Here's how it works. You select one sense to focus on, let's say touch. Then, with a soft fabric or even just your fingertips, you create a gentle, rhythmic pattern of touch on your arm or hand, perhaps tracing small circles or lines. As you do this, you maintain a steady rhythm, perhaps counting silently 1, 2, 3, 4, and repeat. The key is consistency and gentleness. What makes this technique particularly effective for older adults is that it bypasses the thinking brain, which is often where we get caught in worry spirals, and instead speaks directly to the more primitive parts of our brain that control our stress response. Research from the University of California has shown that rhythmic sensory input can reduce cortisol level, our primary stress hormone, by up to 23% in adults over 65, a significantly higher percentage than in younger adults. And the beauty of this technique is that you can practice it anywhere, anytime, without anyone even noticing. You can do it while watching television, sitting in a doctor's waiting room, or even during a conversation that's making you feel anxious. Many of my clients keep a small, soft object in their pocket, like a piece of satin ribbon or a smooth stone, specifically for this purpose. One woman, Elaine, who had suffered from severe anxiety about medical appointments for years, told me she now traces small circles on a polished stone during her entire doctor visit, and has found herself able to clearly communicate her concerns instead of freezing up in panic. I need to pause here and ask you something important. What time of day does your anxiety tend to hit hardest? You know, each person experiences anxiety in their own unique way. and sharing that experience might be the first step toward understanding it better. I know you may never have talked about this with anyone. Perhaps you think no one would understand, or that your feelings aren't important enough, but I want you to know that here, in this space, your experience matters. Leave us a comment below completing the phrase, "My anxiety usually appears when..." Your courage in sharing might be exactly what someone else needs to read today to feel less alone. And in upcoming videos, we'll specifically address these moments you share. This is a community of mutual support, where every word you share is welcomed with respect and understanding. Our second technique addresses a factor that becomes increasingly important as we age: the connection between physical tension and anxiety. This approach is called progressive muscle relaxation with breath pace, a modified version of the classic relaxation technique specifically optimized for older adults. Standard progressive muscle relaxation often involves tensing muscles before relaxing them, but for many older adults, especially those with arthritis, hypertension, or other physical conditions, this tensing can be uncomfortable or even harmful. Instead, this modified approach focuses purely on the relaxation combined with carefully paced breathing. You begin by sitting comfortably in a chair that supports your back. Starting with your feet, you direct your attention to any tension you might be holding there, and without increasing that tension, you simply invite it to soften as you exhale slowly. The key phrase here is invite rather than force, because relaxation cannot be achieved through effort, only through permission. You then gradually move up your body, pairing each area with a slow exhalation: your calves, knees, thighs, hips, abdomen, chest, shoulders, arms, hands, neck, and finally your face and head. What makes this particularly effective for older adults is the way it addresses the cumulative physical tension we often don't even realize we're carrying. A study published in the Journal of Aging and Mental Health found that adults over 60 who practiced this modified technique for just 12 minutes daily experienced a 31% reduction in anxiety symptoms after just 3 weeks, compared to a control group. Even more impressively, these benefits were still present at a 6-month follow-up assessment. Martha, a 73-year-old former teacher who had been experiencing increasing anxiety about falling, shared with me that after practicing this technique daily for a month, she not only felt less anxious, but also noticed she was moving more freely. "I hadn't realized how much I was tensing my body all day long out of fear," she told me. "Now I catch myself doing it, and can release that tension before it builds up into full-blown anxiety." The third approach we're sharing today is specifically designed to address one of the most common, yet least discussed aspects of anxiety in older adults: existential anxiety. As we age, questions about meaning, legacy, and mortality naturally arise, and for many, these thoughts can trigger profound anxiety. The technique is called narrative integration, and it works by helping you weave difficult experiences and uncertainties into your larger life story in a way that creates meaning rather than fear. Unlike some approaches that suggest trying to stop existential thoughts, narrative integration acknowledges that these reflections are natural and potentially valuable, but helps transform them from sources of anxiety to sources of wisdom. Here's how to practice. Set aside 15 minutes in a quiet space with a journal or recording device. Begin by identifying a specific anxiety-provoking thought related to aging, such as concerns about dependency, legacy, or mortality. Rather than trying to analyze or solve this concern, you'll approach it with curiosity, asking, "How does this concern connect to what I value most?" And, "What has my life taught me that might help me face this challenge?" The key is to place your current concerns within the context of your entire life journey, recognizing the wisdom you've accumulated and the values that have guided you. Dr. Robert Butler, the first director of the National Institute on Aging, conducted research showing that older adults who engaged in this kind of life review and integration experienced significant reductions in anxiety and depression, along with improved immune function. What makes this approach particularly powerful is that it transforms the very thoughts that trigger anxiety into sources of meaning and resilience. Joseph, an 81-year-old who had become increasingly anxious about his health, discovered through narrative integration that his fear was connected to concerns about being a burden to his children. By exploring this connection, he was able to have honest conversations with his family that not only reduced his anxiety, but deepened their relationships. "I realized I was projecting my own values onto my children," he said. "When we actually talked about it, I discovered they had very different perspectives on care and dependency than I had assumed." Our fourth technique addresses a factor that becomes increasingly significant as we age: the connection between anxiety and isolation. As we get older, our social circles often naturally shrink due to retirement, friends and family moving away or passing on, and sometimes mobility. Yet research consistently shows that social connection is one of the most powerful buffers against anxiety. The approach I'm sharing is called structured social reconnection, and it's designed specifically to address the unique social challenges that can come with aging. Unlike generic advice to get out more, this technique provides a framework that makes social interaction more manageable and less anxiety-provoking, especially for those who may have become uncomfortable in social settings. The process has three key components. First, micro-connections, which are brief, low-pressure social interactions that can be as simple as a 5-minute conversation with a neighbor or a friendly exchange with a store clerk. The goal is to have at least one such interaction daily. Second, purpose-driven gatherings, which are social activities centered around a shared goal or interest, rather than just socializing for its own sake. This might be a book club, a volunteer opportunity, or a class. The shared purpose provides natural conversation topics and reduces social pressure. Third, tradition building, which involves creating simple, repeatable social rituals with at least one other person, such as a weekly phone call with a friend or a monthly lunch date. The predictability of these traditions provides a social anchor that reduces anxiety about planning and initiating contact. A landmark study from Harvard University that followed participants for almost 80 years found that the quality of people's social relationships was the strongest predictor of their mental and physical well-being as they aged. What's particularly interesting for our discussion today is that the study found it wasn't the quantity of social interactions that mattered, but rather the presence of reliable, authentic connections, even if they were few in number. Doris, a 77-year-old widow who had gradually withdrawn from social life after her husband's death, began with just one micro-connection per day, usually a brief chat with her mail carrier or a neighbor. After 6 weeks, she felt confident enough to join a gardening club, which provided the purpose-driven gathering component. Having plants to discuss made the conversation so much easier, she told me. I didn't have to worry about what to say because we had a shared interest right in front of us. 3 months later, she had established a weekly tradition of Sunday afternoon tea with another member of the club. It's just an hour, but knowing it's on my calendar every week has reduced my anxiety enormously. I no longer worry about whether I'll speak to another human being that. And now, I'd like to share the technique that truly transformed my relationship with anxiety at age 75, after decades of struggling. It's called sensory modulation training, and while the name might sound complicated, the practice itself is beautifully simple. This approach is based on cutting-edge research about how our sensory processing changes as we age, and how these changes can contribute to anxiety. You see, as we get older, our brains often become more sensitive to certain types of sensory input while simultaneously becoming less efficient at filtering out irrelevant stimuli. This means everyday sensory experiences like bright lights, background noise, or busy visual environments can become overwhelming, triggering our stress response without us even realizing why we suddenly feel anxious. Sensory modulation training works by helping you identify your personal sensory triggers and preferences, then systematically creating environments that support your nervous system rather than challenging. The first step is to create what I call a sensory profile, which is simply a document where you note how different sensory experiences affect you. For example, you might notice that you feel calmer in soft, warm lighting, but more anxious under bright fluorescent lights. Or perhaps you find that certain sounds, like running water or soft instrumental music, help you feel grounded, while others, like the TV in the background, make you feel on edge. Once you've identified your personal sensory patterns, you then make systematic adjustments to your environment and daily routines to provide your nervous system with the input it needs to feel safe and regulated. What makes this approach so powerful for older adults specifically is that it addresses a root cause of anxiety that is rarely discussed but becomes increasingly important as we age. A groundbreaking study from Johns Hopkins University found that adults over 65 who implemented personalized sensory modulation strategy experienced a 42% reduction in anxiety symptoms, significantly outperforming both medication and cognitive behavioral therapy in the study group. For me personally, this approach was life-changing. After creating my sensory profile, I realized that I had become increasingly sensitive to visual clutter and background noise, both of which were constant features in my home environment. I made several simple changes, reorganizing my living space to reduce visual complexity, using noise-canceling headphones when in busy environments, ensuring I had periods of complete silence throughout my day, and adjusting the lighting in my home to be warmer and dimmer, especially in the evening. Within weeks, I noticed that the constant background hum of anxiety I had lived with for so long had diminished dramatically. I was sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and most importantly, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. Eleanor, a 68-year-old client with a history of panic attacks, discovered through her sensory profile that she was particularly sensitive to certain fabrics against her skin and to sudden changes in temperature. She began carefully selecting her clothing for maximum comfort rather than style, keeping a soft cardigan with her at all times. and being proactive about temperature regulation. It sounds so simple, she told me, but these small changes have reduced my panic attacks from several times a week to maybe once a month. I never realized how much my sensory experiences were contributing to my anxiety. What ties all 5 of these techniques together is their recognition that anxiety in older adults has unique characteristics and therefore requires specialized approaches. They acknowledge the physiological and neurological changes that come with aging, as well as the existential and social factors become more prominent in our later years. But perhaps most importantly, they all emphasize that anxiety is not an inevitable part of aging, but rather a challenge that can be met with wisdom, patience, and the right tool. I want to leave you with one final thought, drawn from my own journey with anxiety. For many years, I viewed my anxiety as a personal failing, a sign that I wasn't strong enough or resilient enough to handle the challenges of aging gracefully. This perception only increased my suffering, adding a layer of shame on top of the anxiety itself. But what I've come to understand, both through my own experience and through working with hundreds of other older adults, is that anxiety is not a character flaw or a weakness. It's simply information from our bodies and minds that something needs attention. When we learn to listen to this information with compassion rather than judgment, and respond with targeted techniques like the ones we've discussed today, anxiety can actually become a guide that leads us toward greater well-being, rather than an enemy to be feared or fought. If you found value in what we've shared today, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Each week, we share practical, evidence-based approaches to enhancing mental and emotional well-being as we age. In the comments below, I invite you to share which of the 5 techniques resonated most strongly with you, or any questions you might have about implementing them in your daily life. Remember, our community here is a space of mutual support and understanding, where every experience is valid and every question is welcome. And finally, if you know someone else who might benefit from these approaches, whether they're in their 50s and just beginning to notice increased anxiety, or in their 80s and looking for new tools, please share this video with them, because no one should have to spend decades struggling with anxiety when effective solutions. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next week, remember that it's never too late to experience greater peace. Your best years may still be ahead of you.